When you hear the word limousine, you probably picture a sleek, stretched-out car, maybe black or white, with tinted windows and a celebrity hiding inside. It's become the ultimate symbol of luxury, wealth, and being someone important. But here's the thing, why do we even call it a limousine? It's not a word that rolls off the tongue naturally, and it doesn't sound like something connected to cars at all. So where did it come from? Who came up with it? And why has this odd word stuck around for so long? Well, buckle up, because the story behind limousine is actually way older than stretch cars, red carpets, and prom nights. This is the fascinating history behind why is it called a limousine. Today, we're going to trace its journey from shepherds in rural France to early motor cars, and eventually to the glamorous chauffeur-driven vehicles we think of today. Right here on History of Simple Things. To understand the word limousine, we need to step away from cars entirely. The word comes from France, specifically from a region in central France called Limousine. Back in the day, this wasn't a place known for luxury or fancy vehicles. In fact, it was a rural agricultural region, more famous for sheep and shepherds than for wealth. So, what does a sheep herding area have to do with fancy cars? Well, it all comes down to clothing. The shepherds of Limousine wore a very distinctive kind of cloak, a heavy hooded garment that protected them from wind, rain, and cold. Think of it like a big, practical cape. Over time, this cloak became strongly associated with the region itself. In French, things that came from Limousine were described as limousine or limousine. Now here's where it gets interesting. When carriages and later early motor cars were being designed, people noticed that some of them had a covered compartment for passengers, while the driver sat outside in the open air. That covered passenger compartment, protecting you like a cloak, reminded people of the shepherd's hooded cloak from Limousine. So they started calling these kinds of vehicles limousines. Before cars were even invented, the word limousine was used to describe a certain style of carriage. Picture an enclosed coach where the wealthy passenger sat inside, sheltered from the weather, while a driver or coachman sat outside, exposed to the elements. Sound familiar? That's the setup we still see today, the passengers enjoying comfort and privacy in the back while the driver does the work up front. This early carriage design was one of the first links between the idea of limousine and luxury. After all, only wealthy families could afford such coaches. So already, the word carried an air of prestige. If you were riding in a limousine, you weren't just another traveler, you were someone special. Fast forward to the early 20th century. Cars are starting to replace horse-drawn carriages, and designers are borrowing a lot of ideas from those earlier vehicles. One of the designs that carried over was, you guessed it, the limousine. Early automobiles that had an enclosed compartment for passengers in the back and an open seat for the driver were called limousines, simply because they mimicked the old carriage style. By the 1910s, luxury car makers in France and Germany were using the term limousine to market their vehicles. And because the automobile was still a fairly new technology, attaching a word with tradition, class, and exclusivity gave it extra appeal. Riding in a limousine wasn't just about getting from A to B, it was about being seen. One of the defining features of a limousine wasn't just the car itself, but the presence of a driver, what we call a chauffeur. The word chauffeur itself means stoker in French, since early car engines were steam-powered and required someone to literally stoke the fire. Later, as cars switched to gasoline engines, the name stuck around as a fancy term for a professional driver. The chauffeur added another layer to what made a limousine special. It wasn't just that you had a nice car. It was that you didn't have to drive it yourself. You could sit back in comfort, relax, maybe sip a drink, and let someone else handle the road. That sense of luxury, of being taken care of, became central to the identity of the limousine. Now, when most of us think of a limousine today, we picture the long, stretched-out version, big enough to fit an entire bridal party, or a group of rowdy teenagers going to prom. But here's the twist. The very first stretch limousine didn't show up until the 1920s, in Arkansas of all places. In 1928, a company called Armbruster built the first stretch limousine. They were originally designed not for celebrities, but for big bands. Think jazz orchestras traveling between venues. These stretch limousines were perfect for carrying both musicians and their instruments. Over time, though, the extra-long design became associated with VIPs, movie stars, and politicians, since it provided both space and privacy. By the mid-20th century, stretch limos had become the ultimate status symbol. Presidents used them, Hollywood stars arrived in them, and anyone who wanted to project glamour or importance rented one for a night. Interestingly, not all limousines today are the super-stretched cars we imagine. In fact, the definition has broadened to include any luxury car driven by a chauffeur, often with a partition between the driver and the passengers. This means high-end sedans like Mercedes Maybachs or Rolls-Royce Phantoms are considered limousines, even if they're not stretched out. And while the classic stretch limo has lost a bit of popularity in recent years, replaced by SUVs and luxury vans, the word limousine still sticks. It's less about the physical length of the car and more about the idea of being chauffeured in style. So, why is it called a limousine? It all goes back to French shepherds and their hooded cloaks. That design inspired covered carriages, which later evolved into luxurious chauffeur-driven cars. From simple protection against the rain to symbols of fame and power, the word limousine has come a long way, literally and figuratively. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other bingeable channels. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.